sitting here in my kitchen alone, I can't keep from remembering what a wonderful, exciting life we have had. I have had fond memories of my childhood. There are so many things that has 5 years old now, so it is time to tell my story so it will always be remembered. I'll start by telling you about my papa. It was because of his being so full of talent and dreams that this was all possible. He was born September 13th, 1893 in Lynn County around Walker, Iowa. He was the only child of my grandparents, Clark Charles Cady and Laura Olive Williams Cady. They were married October 24th, 1892. This is a picture of my father. This is my great-grandma. She was Grandma Williams, my dad's Grandma Williams. And I remember that she lived right across the street from Uncle Charles Williams in Walker. And then she married Mr. Dreyfall from Independence, and we used to go up there and visit her. She was quite a lady, a good cook. This is Grandma Williams' daughter, Laura, when she was 16 years old, and she was my Grandma Cady, because Clark Cady married her. But she died before I was born, so I never seen her myself. This is my Grandpa Cady and Grandma Cady. Now, she was a daughter of the other lady that was sitting in her yard, of the Williams. And this must be a picture after they were quite old. It must have been just a short time before he lost her. They're standing out in their garden. I guess that Grandma Cady was a great hand to have a lot of flowers around all the time. I feel bad that I never got to see her even, because she died before I was born. But they was married in February 24th, 1892. I can't hardly remember that far back. Oh. But anyway, they had that one child, and that was my dad. And this is the baby that they had. This is my father when he was a baby. He was born September the 13th, 1893. And they named this special little boy Charles, Grandpa's middle name, and William, Grandma's maiden name. So he was a namesake. As long as he had no brothers and sisters, he grew very close to his cousins. His Aunt Ida and Uncle Fred Mason had 12 children, 9 boys and 3 girls. So between school years, he'd go out and visit them on their big farm out by Elburn, Iowa. You see, Aunt Ida was a sister to my Grandpa Cady. There's 12 kids, and Pop were like brothers and sisters. Now this is the Mason family. You see, Aunt Ida was my Grandpa Cady's sister. She was a Cady girl. So I'll try to tell you their names. You start in the left-hand upper corner, and that is Frank. And the girl next to him is Maggie. And then there's Perry, and Purvis, and Luella, and Watson, and William, clear on the right. Then if you go back to the three boys standing behind their parents. The one on the left is Sherman, the one in the middle is Ralph, and the one standing on the right-hand side of his mother is Albert. Now, Aunt Ida is holding Cliff. He was next to the youngest child, and Uncle Fred is holding Clara. Now, Clara is still alive, and she lives in Marshalltown. We do see her once in a while. They had a big farm, so of course they had a lot of stock and a lot of milk cows. And the boys would do the farming with horses because there was no tractors in them days. They'd cut the hay and then they would rake it up and they'd put it up in the barn just loose. There was no bales in them days. And the boys would ride a horse out after the milk cows every night. And one night, as one of them were bringing the cows in, it was in the spring and the creek they had to cross was out of bank and really roaring. They started through when all of a sudden his horse fell into a deep hole. Of course he was a teenager and a good swimmer, but he had some boots on that come to his knees and they were open at the top. They soon filled up with water, so he couldn't swim. So he went down to the bottom and sat down and pulled off his boots and swam on across, just safe and sound. A farmer's life was very exciting for Pop, of course. He got to help with all the chores and work, but when they got done they would play ball and horseshoe and so forth. Pop decided he'd never raise one child alone because the fun he had every summer was very good out there at the Mason family. And now this is a Mason's house where Pop visited in the summer. It was a 3-story house up in them little windows at the top there. When I was a kid, we would go clear up in the 3rd story and they had it all fixed up for kids to play up there. And when you come down the stairway from the 3rd floor, you came right into the kitchen. And one day I come running down them steps and into the kitchen, and there was Uncle Fred, and he was drinking out of his coffee pot that he had sitting on the back of the old cook stove back by the reservoir. And I guess you know what the reservoir is like. It holds water and it keeps it warm. And it's on the back of them old cook stoves that they used to cook with wood and coal in them. Anyway, he had his own coffee pot and he was just drinking out of it. And he says, "Would you like some of Uncle Fred's coffee?" I said, "Sure." So I took his coffee pot and I took a little drink out of it too. He wasn't musical like the rest of the family because he was a Mason, not a Cady. And the Cady family was all musical, and we did play music at that house lots of times, even after when we were growing up. But Aunt Ida played the piano, and my great-grandpa Henry Cady played the fiddle, and my grandpa Clark Cady played the violin and mandolin all his life. He taught me how to play the mandolin. And I was told that my grandma Cady was a beautiful piano player. You see, she died in 1920, a year before I was born. I visited 3 of the Mason boys in their late years, and a lot of this they told me. My great-grandpa and my grandpa Clark played for lots of dances around Walker, Center Point, and Cedar Rapids. No, not in a dance hall or nightclub like you see that today. They went to different farms and played in the hayloft. One night they was playing until closing time, and every time they started putting their instruments away, everyone would want just one more. They'd say, "Come on, Henry, just one more." Well, he played one more 2 or 3 times. Finally, they yelled for just one more, and my Grandpa Henry said, "No, that's it for tonight." He took a hold of the strings of his fiddle and just yanked them right off. You see, there was a little temper in the family, too. Well, Pop soon joined them with his guitar. He loved to sing. He spent a lot of happy evenings playing with his dad and Grandpa. Of course, as Pop was growing older, he had to find a job, so he started to deliver milk. Of course, Pop was pretty young when he got the job of delivering the milk all over Cedar Rapids, and he delivered it with his horse and wagon. And this is a picture that I found in a paper recently that showed how they used to line up to get their milk, to take it to deliver it. And the caption from this newspaper reads, "Milk wagons line up in front of the Pasteurized Milk Company." This building was located at 519 H Street Southwest. And then after they didn't need it for the milk anymore, it used to be the Hutchison's Ice Cream Company. And then in 1986 it became Ken's Bait Shop. I remember buying bait in there. So that's been a very popular building for years. His folks at this time lived in Buffalo. That's a small town northwest of Cedar Rapids and west of Hiawatha. Grandpa and Pop had a cement block business there. The whole town was just a church and a few houses. Their business was just across the road from the church. They built a cement barn there with cobblestone fronts on the blocks. This is a picture of the blocks that they made. They're just some cobblestones there, I think, but the rest is just the other rock pattern. And that's Grandpa and Grandma standing there. And the barn that they built, I had a picture of that, but I can't seem to find it. But anyway, it's made out of those blocks. And they had a block machine that you had to run by hand. And they mixed all the cement by hand and tamped it into the block machine. And it had to be just the right amount of water added to the cement and have it just right to pack in there good. And then they had to move the sides away very carefully. One side went to the right and the other one had a handle so it could go to the left. And they had to be very careful so they wouldn't crack the block. And then time they got the ends all off, the sides all off, they let the iron part down that run with their foot that had two holes in it for the middle of the blocks. And then it would be sitting on an iron plate. They would move the plate all over at a time and had to sprinkle them with water every day until they set up. With no running water, that must have been a lot of work. The cement barn was torn down just a couple years ago in 1993. It was a pretty little barn. So then they moved their business to Walker. Grandpa bought a house in the southwest corner of town. This is the house that Grandpa built and that Grandpa bought in Walker in the southwest end of Walker, and my brother Leo lives there in that house yet. And that is where Grandpa and Grandma Cady lived, and then Grandpa lived there also with his second wife, Annie. So, and out to the left of that house, Grandpa had a whole row of beehives, and he raised bees and sold the honey. And I think that's Grandma standing on the porch there. I'm not sure. Like I say, I never did see her. But anyway, that house looks a lot different since Lee was remodeled it. And then after that, after Pop moved into Walker, he was growing up and started doing something on his own. So they started up a barber shop. Now this is the barber shop that they started up. I think Grandpa run it mostly. It kind of looks like Pop standing back there in the back, and Grandpa standing up there with a barber chair. But anyway, that was in Walker, and it was on Main Street. I think it was on Main Street running north and south. So maybe I can find a picture of that street. So I'll be right back. Now this is the Main Street of Walker. I don't know for sure which one of those buildings was the barber shop, but I kind of think it's where this first buggy is, where the sign is out by the building. I kind of believe that might have been the barber shop. But this is Main Street of Walker, Iowa. The next job that Pop got after along about the same time as that barber shop, they decided to have a movie picture house in Walker. So this is a picture of the movie machine that Pop started the first theater in Walker with. And the nice part about it is that it was him and Harry Warner that got the machine and started into business together as partners. And in later years, Royal married Harry Warner's daughter, Marie. So it just kind of kept it all in the family. But before they got done running the theater, Harry Warner dropped out of it and Pop done it by himself. Now my dad was a pretty smart man. He was well educated, although he said he only went through the 3rd grade at school. He was 6 foot tall, dark hair, blue eyes, very well built, with good looks, manners, and so much talent in many fields. He started making his life goals happen. He just read a lot and learned a lot from experience and his own plans and ideas. He was always trying new things. Then he met my mom. She was a wonderful girl. She drove a horse-drawn school bus and helped with her education. She was a beautiful, brown-eyed brunette. Mom was a sweet little baby. This is a picture of her in her baptizing dress. And she was the second from the oldest in her family. And her mother was Lily Starr. Well, she was Lily Straw before she married Butterfield. My grandpa's name was Reuben Justice. And that was their little baby girl that they named Ella May. I got some pictures of her parents here. We'll put them on there. We'll know who she belonged to then. Now, my mother was born to Reuben Justice Butterfield. And this is a young picture of him because he didn't live to be only about 40 or so. He had diabetes and he had a short life. But him and Grandma together had 7 kids, 7 children, and oh, they had 8. And Mom had 4 sisters and 4 brothers. And one of the boys died when it was a baby, and one of the sisters died when it was 2 weeks old. So there was lots of problems in the family too. And my mother was only 12 years old when she lost her dad. So this is what her daddy looked like, and I've never seen any other picture of him at all, just this one. Now this is Mom's mother, and she was our Grandma Butterfield because she married Justin, Reuben Justin, and there was 7 living children when she was telling me about her life, and they all grew up. My mother was the second from the oldest, and then there was Uncle Roy, older than her. Of course, we called him Uncle Roy all the time, and when Grandpa died, it left Mom and Uncle Roy to do the farming because they was farming at that time. They lived about a half a mile west of Walker and Troy Mills. It's about in between there. And she was a strong person, putting up hay and all that for her folks. But her grandma was with my mother when all of us 10 were born. She was always there. And I remember when she married her second man, and so then she was Grandma Starr. But she was Grandpa Starr, and it was when I was quite old that she got married the second time. So we had her, she always had her cookie jar full of sugar cookies, and her pies would melt in your mouth. And it never mattered when we got down there, she always had a wonderful meal. And we just thought a lot of our grandma. This is a picture of Mom and her brothers and sisters. You see there's 7 of them there, and you want to start at the top on the left. That is Uncle Roy, and the one down next to him is my Aunt Annabelle. She married Ray Zimfer. And the next one is my mom, Ella May. And then you go back up and start again, and that is Calvin. And Emer is a little baby in the middle. And Doris is down in front of Mom. And the little one over there with the curly hair to the left is Dorwin, my uncle. So they had quite a family, and Grandma raised them from about that size all by herself because she didn't have any husband. So Mom had quite a childhood and done a lot of hard work, and there was 9 years between Uncle Roy and Uncle Calvin, so Mom had to fill in as a man there, a boy in between. Mom graduated on the 17th, she graduated on the 17th day of May in 1910. After Pop and her was acquainted. My mother graduated from the Walker Schoolhouse, and this is a picture of the school at that time. And of course it's been added to and everything since, but this is a good picture of the Walker Schoolhouse. Mom was a pretty girl when she graduated. This is her graduation picture. And of course, after her and Pop got acquainted, they started dating. And I remember that Pop talked about his courting days some. He told about taking Mom home one night, kind of late, and he was tired and sleepy. The next morning he woke up, and it was daylight, and here he was in the buggy, parked by the pasture gate. His horse was waiting for him to let him into the pasture. That was one good thing about their transportation in them days. They had eyes and was well trained to stay on the road. Mom went on to become a school teacher, and then on October 20th, 1915, Pop and her got married. Mom and Pop was pretty young when they got married. Mom was 18 and I think Pop was 21. And Grandma Butterfield had a nice home wedding for them over in her house. And I think that the folks and Uncle Roy and Aunt Velma all got married at the same time, a double ceremony. Mom and Pop stood up with Uncle Roy and Velma, and they stood up with my folks. And then of course, their anniversaries was always on the same day, so that was quite an event. It got into the paper and told all about how many guests and everything. But anyway, they got married and started their life together. Well, by this time, World War I was in full swing. Life was hard and money was scarce. Pop and Mom lived up over a store building in Walker for a while. In 1916, on August 7th, my oldest brother, Royal Charles, was born. Of course, he was the sweetest baby they had ever seen. This is him on the screen now, driving his car. He looks like he's almost 2 years old there. He was real small. He was real small when a tornado hit Walker, destroying a lot of trees and so forth. It really blew things around. A piece of straw drove right into a trunk of a tree. It hit Grandma Butterfield's home too, and she found a little blue piggy bank in her yard. Never did know where it came from. Us kids played hide the thimble with it years later. But Royal was always the oldest brother, and we all looked up to him. And I guess there wasn't no little baby picture of him. I think this is the littlest picture that they had of him. I never remember seeing him as a real little baby. Well, Pop wanted to have a bigger family, so in 1918, on June the 4th, my oldest sister was born. They named her their special baby Leona May. Knowing they wasn't going to raise one child alone meant a lot to Pop. The folks were living and working on the Troy farm by now. They lived in a big house where a man had killed his family and was put in a mental health hospital in Independence. This house was only 5 or 6 miles south of the hospital. Mom was always thinking she heard strange noises and was afraid he'd get out and come back home. Pop was on a farm and working and everything. He finally got his papers to be ready to go to the Army. And this is his certificate to go here. It says local board from the county of Lynn, state of Iowa, Marion, Iowa. And it says a notice of call and to appear for physical examinations for Charlie William Cady, Walker, Iowa. You are hereby notified that pursuant to the Act of Congress approved May 18, 1917, you are called for military service of the United States by this local board from among those persons whose registration cards are within the jurisdiction of this local board. Your serial number is 1026 and your order number is 565. You will report to the office of this local board for physical examination on the 12th day of September 1917 at 10 o'clock a.m. Even though they told him he probably wouldn't have to go, he got this letter to get ready. So he got all ready to go, was getting ready to leave his family and so forth. And just before his date came up, the war came to an ending. What a blessing. He was free again. He didn't have to go after all. And so sometime during his marriage, when he was first married, he worked on a railroad gang. He was a foreman on the repair group. I don't know just what line or anything, the Rock Island probably. They had moved back to Walker. He started working in the Walker Creamery and soon became butter maker. Cars were just being invented. There were two of them in town. Pop owned one of them, and one day he was driving east from the city square going toward the Catholic Church. It sits on a hill with a rock fence built on the south and east sides. Around the corner, as he turned north from the east, you can't see if anyone is coming or not. Just as Pop turned, he seen this other car backing up toward him in full speed. The driver had been drinking. He hit Pop's car head on, broke out the light, and the lights were just like lanterns hanging on the front. Put both cars out of use for a while. Pop laughed about this a lot of times. But problems began to pile up for him when his mother got real sick. So the folks moved in with Grandpa and Grandma Cady to help out. Grandma just got worse as time passed. Mom had Royal and Leona and was expecting number 3 soon. She stayed with Grandma until she got very bad and asked Mom to go stay with her own mother in Troy Mills. Women were very superstitious in those days. They thought any unpleasant or sad thing that a pregnant woman was close to could affect the unborn baby. Mom went home and stayed with her own mother. And she hadn't been home with her mother very long until Grandma Cady got real bad, and on the 20th day of January in 1920, Grandma Cady died. Then on January the 26th, Mom had her baby, a precious little girl. They named her Luella Marie. She had pretty blue eyes and kind of light hair, so they were still living with Grandpa and Grandma. The 3 little ones kind of got hard on his nerves, I guess. One day Royal was playing with something that he didn't think he should have, so he said to Mom, "My gosh, Ella May, why don't you give that boy a hammer and a looking glass?" I guess Mom said, "I do when you're not home, but never the two at the same time." I'll bet that went over like a lead balloon. Remember all this, so remember, all of this is before what I've been told by others. I'm not even born yet. But all my life I've listened when Pop and Mom and Grandpa and my brothers and sisters and the Mason families as they were reminiscing at times. Well, Grandpa was lonely, so he had a girlfriend from Toledo. Pop didn't understand how anyone could take his mother's place, so he bought some land across the road and started building a house of their own. He got it finished, and it was a small house, 2 rooms downstairs and 2 rooms up. They moved in the fall of 1921. Well, Grandpa and Annie got married October the 2nd, 1921. Pop and him quit speaking, and the rest of the family were told not to associate with Grandpa either. My dad didn't want anyone replacing his mother. Well, after all the excitement and things and the problems with Grandpa, on October 11th, 1921, I had the honor of being the first baby born in our new house. I was born in the north upstairs room. Pop had wanted another boy, but here I was. I guess it was kind of hard finding names by now, so I was named Mildred Lucille. And that's me sitting in the buggy there. And now we'll look at all 3 of us girls together, and I don't know, I guess I must have always been a problem child. My sister said when I was about 1.5 years old, I got away from them and they were giving me a bath. And I ran outside and up the road as bare as a bird. They finally caught me. Then one day us 3 girls were making mud pies, and Leona and Luella tricked me into eating one. They got a big kick out of that. As I grew older, I remember Papa was building a sidewalk out in the front of our house. All the other kids were carrying water for his cement from Lot's house across the street. I wanted to help, of course, so Pop says, "Wait just a minute, and you can help too." So he took a little lard pail and fixed a wire bail on it so it wouldn't come off. So I was a happy little water girl. My pop was always very good to me. Well, I was learning to talk, but I didn't seem to learn very fast. You see, we lived across the alley from the Bohemi family. I loved to go talk to the old grandma that didn't speak English. So I got her talk mixed up with ours. By this time, Grandma Butterfield had moved off the farm into a new house that Pop helped build. It was a half-mile south of Troy Mills, but being a widow for so long, she was working awful hard. 3 of her kids were still at home, and Emer, the youngest, was going to school in Independence. And in the meantime, while Grandma was working so hard at her place, my brother William was born. And he was born in the same room that I was, I guess, in the new house. And so we welcomed the 5th baby into the family. And Pop was so happy that he was a boy that he danced and sang to him every night. Pop and William, he raced to see who would get in bed first after he got a little bigger. And William jumped into the bed and Pop jumped in after him, and it broke the bed down. So they laughed about that. His name was William Elwin. He was born August 4th, 1924, in the same room where I was. He was 2 years and 10 months younger than I was. Pop really had him spoiled. William really took to the singing and dancing and had to have that every night for a long time. By the fall of 1925, Grandma Butterfield was needing help with expenses, so we moved in with her. This is Grandma's house where we moved into, and Pop had started working as a butter maker in Raleigh by this time. It was a good job, but a long drive every day. The weather was so bad, and the winter was a bad one with a lot of snow. I seem to remember Pop getting up real early a couple mornings and taking the horse and sleigh to work. Then another problem came along. We all come down with scarlet fever. Mom was pregnant again, and the doctor was really afraid of if she got it, he might lose her and the baby. He gave us all a shot of vaccine, even Uncle Calvin and Uncle Darwin. And them and Pop were quarantined out. The rest of us was quarantined in. Mom stayed right up and took such good care of all of us that most of us didn't get very sick. Mom done good, and Grandma was a lot of help too. But Royal, he really had it bad. I remember the night we all sat around his bed. The doctor stayed right there. Royal was in the living room on the sofa with a high head. We all watched as he slept and never moved all night. About 4 in the morning, he woke up. His fever had broke and he was past the danger point. Mom rushed out to tell Pop he was going to be okay. Such a sad, scary night, but a happy ending. We never told Dr. Clausen, but Pop lived in Grandma's summer kitchen. We had she had a 4-hole wood cook stove, and in there that he could cook on, and she always had her water for washing there. Then he had a sofa and a rocking chair. There was a washing machine in there, and you'd pull the lever back and forth to work the dolly. Sure was hard on arms. After supper, Mom would let some of us kids go out to see Pop, and we'd line up on the sofa, and he sat in the rocking chair in front of the wood stove. It burned so pretty, he liked to watch it, and he would let us tell us stories and play his guitar for her, and we'd all help him sing. I guess he'd had scarlet fever as he grew up, but he could still carry it, I think, so we couldn't get too close to him. He'd bring groceries and set them on the back porch. Mom and Grandma, or Grandma, would bring them on in. Mom would most generally meet him. She needed a little love, you know. She'd always go visit Pop after we were in bed. I can remember our quarantine lasting until spring because the school bus windows were open, and when they went by, the kids would all yell, "Quarantine, scarlet fever, ha ha ha." But we all made it through, and Royal, Leon, and Luella got back to school. I often think how nice our grandma was with 7 extra people all winter, and how hard it must have been on Mom in her condition. We were just thankful we all made it. So in the spring, Pop rented a place closer to his work. This is a picture of the house, but it's the way it looks now. It was a newer house then, and it had a nice front porch on it, and out to the west end of it, Pop fixed us a park with playthings in it. but the front of that house was a lot prettier, and it was on the four corners between Walker and Quoskey and Raleigh, right there. 7 miles north of Walker, 2.5 miles southwest of Quosquitton, and 5 and 6 miles straight east of Raleigh. The house had 4 rooms downstairs and 3 rooms up. The only one finished upstairs was the north room. Royal and William shared that at first. The west room was for us 3 girls, Leona, Laurel, and I. The room by the stair steps was for the folks. Along the edge of the steps was an old telephone switchboard laying on its side that made a nice rail so no one would fall. Downstairs there was a nice kitchen with a cupboard built between the kitchen and the dining room. The 3 drawers slid either way, and the doors were glass on the dining room side and wood on the kitchen, where the cupboard reached from the ceiling to the floor and from the dining room door to the west wall. I was only 4 years old, so this really impressed me. If the wooden door was open, we could see right out to the kitchen. Of course, it was also handy if Pop and Mom wanted to check on us while we were washing dishes or something. It had a long dining room and a long living room, and on the west side of the house there was a small bedroom on the east and also a small room north of that where the stairs was. We had a lot of room in that house, but the yard was about 2 acres of ground. There was a garden west of the house, and our playground was just south of that along the road under the row of nice trees. There was a barn with a lean-to building where we had chickens. The barn held a cow, and Pop kept his car in it too. So that was right on to the chicken house, also a lean-to. And then there was a littler building, and it was a toilet. So we used the outhouse in those days. Us kids could crawl up to the peak of the barn and slide down the roof of the 3 buildings and jump right off on the ground. We had a lot of fun there. One day we were all sliding on the roof, and Bill crawled up and thought he could slide down too. And he sat on the peak the wrong way and slid off the wrong side and lit in the manure pile. And Royal ran around there, and after making sure he was okay, took him and cleaned him up. This barn here is where we always bought our milk. Mr. Moore, Wallace Moore, lived up there, and he used to be so good to us kids. We'd walk up at night and go to that barn door that you can see on this end of the barn and watch him milk by hand and separate the milk with a separator, and we could watch him, and we'd buy a gallon of milk every night. And that's his house up there in the trees. And in the fall, he would get us girls to, well, I guess it'd be in the spring, he'd get us girls to go and pick all the sprouts off his potatoes. And every year when he got his crops all took care of, he'd have a big oyster soup feed up there. All the neighbors and us was invited up, and he made that himself. And we'd have an oyster soup supper. And a lot of nights he'd come down to our place, and he would have some fudge all made. And we'd pop popcorn and eat homemade fudge. I've still got the plate that he used to put his fudge on when he'd come and brought it. He would bring his fudge up on, and I always thought it was a pretty plate, so Mom gave it to me when she lived in Toddville. So that's what Mr. Moore would bring his candy up on. And we had a good evening. And so the spring was, in the early spring, we were just kind of getting settled into the place. And on April 21st, 1926, when we got up, we had a big surprise. Tucked in a rocking chair with a bunch of pillows was a sweet little baby. It was another boy. They named him Leo Wade. So now there is 3 of us girls and 3 boys. Leo is a cute little guy. The first one I can remember very good. He was a lot of fun to play with. I could rock him in the rocking chair, and I couldn't hold him alone because I was only about 5 years old. Royal was 7 years old now, so he was in charge of helping Mom watch us kids. Bill was always, we always called him William, gave him a bad time. One day he locked himself in the boys' bedroom upstairs. Of course, Royal was always supposed to take care of all of us if Mom was gone or something. And I can remember seeing Royal down on his knees outside the door, peeking through the keyhole, trying to get William to push the little button and unlock it. Well, that didn't work, so Royal went down, got the ladder, climbed up one of the windows, and he finally got in the window and brought William out after unlocking the door. Boy, was that little boy scared and upset, but so was the rest of us. Summer was passing and September came. I wasn't quite 5 yet, but the folks started me to school anyway. This is the school in Quasqueton where we went. The teacher kept sending notes home wanting my age, but Mom wouldn't tell her until after my birthday, because of the way I taught. They thought I would be good for my mixed up language. I can remember going home from school with my teacher, Vera Mielik. While she helped get supper, her brother Chester would help me say words right. I really liked all of his attention. Then after we ate and talked a while, they'd drive me home. I liked that whole family. The dad's name was Chad. He was the janitor at school. He was most always standing right there with them 2 double doors that you can see in the schoolhouse and watching us kids when we was out at recess. And if we wanted anything, the bell to call us in, the rope hangs down just on the left-hand side of them double doors there. And he was the one that rang the bell to bring us in from the recess. And he was always good to us. Kept candy in a sack for us and played games with us. He was everybody's friend. I was in 1st grade, Luella in 2nd, Leon in 3rd, and Royal in 4th. We all went to this same school. Of course, living in the country, we were taken to school with a bus. Our neighbor, Charlie Crawford, was our driver. One winter, the snow was so deep, he took us in a bobsled pulled by 2 big horses. He had warm soapstones for us small ones. We were supposed to sit up front by him and put our feet on the stones, wrapped in flannel to keep us warm. Well, the big boys had always made over me so much on account of my way of talking, so I went back in the back. They would jump out of the back and run a while and then get back in. So they talked me into trying it. They said, "It's just a lot of fun. Come on, you can do it." I was just about 6 years old now. So, of course, I tried it. I jumped out, but was too short to reach the back of the box to get back in. So I hung on to the wagon box, and they finally helped me back in. That was enough of that. the driver let me know in no uncertain terms, I think it was in the spring of the same year, that I run and got on the bus. One of the boys said, "Mildred, where's your dinner bucket?" I said, "I think Leona bringed it." Or in English, I thought Leona brought it. I heard that line from them guys for years. One day I was in Independence, and from across the street, I heard it. I looked over there, and there was Wayne Brown yelling at me. I was pretty well grown up by now, and it was really embarrassing. But school days in Kowalski was enjoyable. We're up to 1927 now. Now it was sometime after this that this picture was taken in Grandma's kitchen. Her cupboard there on the right of us, you can see some of the dishes in it, and she had a deep freeze then behind her. This is quite a few years, because I was all grown up. But anyway, in 1927, Grandma Butterfield and her new husband, Frank Starr, came to our house. And here she went to Independence and got married to Frank Starr, and is married on May the 24th, and was visiting us as part of their honeymoon. It took a while to get used to calling Grandma by her new name. Grandpa Starr was a very quiet man. He shaved his face with his hair clippers, so he always had a short beard. Well, to get on with the story, this was when the music became important in our lives. I bought Mom a brand new piano when they were first married. Royal and us three girls took piano lessons from Maud Polk. She lived 2 houses west of us. I only stuck with it for 1 year. Leona and Luella learned to play good. They liked it. Mom was a beautiful piano player herself. I remember Pop and Mom playing together, and they sang too. And this is a piano in later years. Mom still had the one that Pop got her when they was first married. And that was in her living room in Toddville, and you see some of the graduation pictures up on it there. And Pop would play the violin or guitar, and he had a holder for his harmonica, so he would play guitar and harmonica together. Pop just couldn't wait to get us kids started in music. We always got a harmonica in our Christmas stocking. 1 year, Bill got a juice harp. Royal had a 3/4 size violin, and Leona had a Hawaiian guitar. I remember one Christmas, Pop brought some boards home, and he built a little stage in the northeast corner of our living room. He put together a little program. He invited relatives in. I remember sitting on the edge of the stage with my sisters and Bill, and we put the action into the Cobbler's song. I crossed my right leg over my left, put my left hand in the fist on my knee, pounding it with my right hand, and put in the sound of rat-a-tat-tat as we all sang. We all sang Christmas songs, and then Pop lit the candles on the tree. A fun night, and our first experience as a family of entertainers. Pop was proud. This is a painted picture of the house on the corner where we lived that Velma Nissen painted for me and added the porch on the front because it wasn't on the one that I took. And we had a lot of room outdoors there, so on the left-hand side of the corner of that house is where Pop built us a park to play in. Pop took the shady south side of the garden and fenced it off and built a swing, trapeze, rings, all on the wooden holders. It looked like a big sawhorse. He made it real strong. He made us a merry-go-round and a teeter-totter, all out of wood. Then there was a horseshoe diamond on the north edge, and it was a private park. It was nice and shady all day. Of course, it wasn't all fun and enjoyment. We all had our own chores to do. I remember before I ever started school, Mom could set the dishpan down on a couple chairs so I could wash and dry the dishes. We had to carry water into the reservoir on the end of the cook stove and have hot water. Ashes were emptied from the stove, and there was a little door right under the oven, and we had to clean that soot out there quite often on the oven. We wouldn't bake things on the bottom. Mom had a lot of things to do. She cooked wonderful meals, baked bread, pies, cakes, and cookies, besides all the sewing and cleaning she done. The Raleigh Creamery where Pop worked, and he's got Royal there with him, and that's one of his cream trucks sitting out there in front. And besides Mom doing all the things that I already mentioned, she even made those white overalls and shirts that they have on there. Because Pop had to have white to work in the creamery. And Royal just went in and helped him once in a while. And she always made us girls dresses, 3 all alike. So we all dressed alike. And one day when Pop was short of help at the creamery, he asked Mom if I could go over and help him. So he had William and me. I was dressed in white overalls too. And Royal was out on the cream route. And he had William and me wrapping up the butter after he cut it into pounds and putting it in a box. We worked with him a good half day there, and it was fun. Well, now it was winter time. It's in January, and on the 19th day of January, we got another baby brother. His name was Stanley DeVere. I think he weighed almost 12 pounds. His first name was from Stanley Wiley, that was married to Luella Mason, and his middle name they picked because of our mailman from Raleigh, DeVere Grover. He was a good friend of theirs. I think it kept Pop and Mom busy figuring out names that they felt was good enough for their babies. But they kept on building their family, a new baby about every 2 years. They loved every one of us. Of course, in them days there were traveling gypsies, and they would drive a big car and stop out in front, and Mom would get us kids all inside and hook the door. They could come to the door and beg for money and food. If they'd see a ripe tomato on the window, they were on the windowsill where Mom would put them to ripen. After she said, "I don't have a thing I can give you," they'd say, "How about them tomatoes? Can't we have them?" Mom said, "No, I need them for my children." So she told us that they were always picking up little kids is why the car was pretty close together. There was only 1 year and 9 months between them. They were so near the size, they were like twins. I remember the cute little short suits Mom made, and as soon as Stanley could run and play, she dressed them alike a lot. You see, Mom always wanted a set of twins, but her wish never happened. I'll put a little story about Stanley in here. He got stuck in the mud out in the garden when he was a real little kid. And Royal had to put boards down to keep from sinking in the mud and went out and rescued him. Then one day while we were playing with that little blue piggy bank down to Grandma Stars that I told about being there after the tornado, it was Stan's turn to hide it. So we all blinded our eyes, and pretty soon we heard his little voice, and he says, "Me hide that little piggy in a good place." It was so cute. Luella will always remember just how he sounded. Her and Stanley was always close. This is one of her fond memories. There's lots of memories as we grow up. Now this is a family up to now. When Stan was a baby, you see, there were 7 of us. And we still lived in the country, in the same place. And we had a lot of things to remember about that place. We had some real good ball games down on the hill west of the house. And Royal and William was playing against us 3 girls. No one lost all the time. We had a family life to be proud of. Oh yeah, there was a night that Royal called William and I and said, "Come on, I'll take you snipe hunting." Of course we got excited. We lit the lantern and got a burlap sack from the barn. He took us down over the hill and he said, "Here now, you each just take hold on the top of this sack and keep it wide open, and I'll go around the hill and chase them right back here. They'll be right in the sack first thing you know, because they like to go to the light." So he left, and we sat there waiting for a long time. Pretty soon we got up and went to the house, and there's that Royal just laughing his head off. William and I was used to being picked on by the older kids. They'd always playing tricks on us, so we wasn't even mad. Now we didn't have closet space in that house too much, so Pop had made us girls each a trunk to put our clothes in. And they were made from shipping crates, so they were just rough lumber. Luella's was narrow and had a little box built in on one end. She kept handkerchiefs and small things in it. So one day we were up there playing around, and she took everything out of her trunk and said, "Mildred, I'll bet you can't get down in there far enough for me to put the lid on." And I said, I bet you can't. See the mischief in them little eyes of hers. She's always a thinking of something to pull on me, do something to me. So she crawled in the box, and I bent her head down to clear the lid, and I put the lid on real careful, and then I took it right off again. Well, she gets out and says, "Now I'll bet you can't do that." And of course me, I never could be outdone, so I said, "Well, if you can do it, I can do it." So I got right in there. No problem. She put the lid on and sat on it. She laughed and I couldn't get out. Seemed like a long time, but it probably wasn't. The bridge here is really a river bridge, but it's made the same way that the bridge was that went over the creek where we went fishing. We always called it Turtle Bridge. Pop would make us fish poles with sticks and string and a little hooks, and Mom would fix a big picnic dinner, and we'd have a good time. Mom would set an embroidery and watch her little ones, and sometimes we'd go to Bingo Lake. That's on the east side of Quasqueton. The Lotsey River runs through Quaski, where we went to school, and we would probably go across that bridge on our way to Bingo Lake on the east side of Quaski. And Mom would always be happy there, just doing her own work, and we just had wonderful meals. And we always got a lot of small sunfish and bullheads and so forth. We'd clean them and eat them, and ate them all. We had a happy summertime outings. But the summer was soon gone. Pop's creamery work was growing. He believed in big Christmases. Now this was when I was about 8 years old, and for that Christmas I got this set of drums. This picture is out of a book, so it's got some things around the drums, but that was my little set of drums that I got for Christmas in 1929, I think. So that year, of course, Luella got a tenor banjo. She's quite a little bit older in this picture here, but it shows the banjo that she got for Christmas, same time I got the drums. And Royal got a rifle that year, and William had a BB gun. And Stan and Leo got little carts pulled by iron horses. Of course, we all got a new pair of shoes and a big pail of candy with different kinds in it. A 5-pound box of chocolates, too. You just can't believe that tree. Our socks were full of peanuts and so forth, and the tree had balloons blew up and tied all over it with socks and handkerchiefs laying across the branches. Just beautiful. Wonderful gift for everybody. The balloons became a family tradition. So here's the Quaski schoolhouse again, where we all went to school, and I needed somebody to teach me to play my drums that I got. So the McGinnis girls were all musical, and they were teachers. I was in 3rd grade now. Viola McGinnis was my teacher. I took the drums to school, and at recess she'd read the instruction book and that come with them. And she was able to teach me to play by note. We had a lot of enjoyment when our teachers would ride home with us on the bus. We'd play baseball while Mom prepared a delicious supper. Then we'd play music. David Dean McGinnis played the trombone, and Viola McGinnis played the trumpet. Quaski started their band with Albert Cole's help in 1930. What excitement! Pop went to the meeting about the band, and he ordered 4 expensive horns, a baritone for Royal and a clarinet for Leona and a trombone for Luella and a mellophone for William. Of course, I had my drums and played them in the band for years. When they delivered the instruments, of course our school superintendent come along. He sat down in a chair that was kitty-cornered in a corner of the living room. Well, Luella was blowing into the mouthpiece of the baritone, of the trombone, but of course wasn't getting a clear sound. So Mr. Lenhart says, maybe you should blow in the other end. And he leaned back to laugh and tipped over in the corner. And there he laid on his back with his feet in the air. Pop had to help him up. Of course, seeing our school superintendent in that shape was really fun for us kids. Oh, this is a superintendent right there. That's Mr. Lenhart. He's the one tipped over in the corner. So Royal's back there with his that's a bass horn he's holding now because they decided to have him play bass instead of baritone. Now that's David Dean McGinnis, and there's Luella, and right there's Leona with her clarinet, and there I am with my drums, and there's William with his mellophone. And back here in the corner, up in here, this is Mr. Cole. He's the one that instigated the whole thing. And that was the night of our first concert in that. And if I could see, oh yeah. Right there, I believe that's Viola McGinnis, the one that taught me to play my drums. Right there with her trumpet. Well, anyway, Pop spent almost $500 on instruments. In Depression time, that was a lot of money. But Pop was always planning ahead. If he made $1, he saved at least 25 cents. Mom and him had the money and saved it, even if he didn't trust the banks. There was a lot of things happening when we lived here in the country. At this place here, this is not what it looked like exactly, but pretty close. And we had a cow to give us milk, chickens for eggs, and Mom raised a big garden that'd be on the left-hand side of that house, back in the back of it. And she canned everything she could. Leona and Luella helped a lot with all the housework. We had kerosene lanterns and lamps for lights. The chimneys had to be cleaned every day, and the lamps filled with kerosene. We cooked on a wood and coal stove, and we had to carry all our waste out in our buckets. I remember helping Mom wash clothes on the washboard. We'd stomp them in a tub first with a stomper, and then she would rub them on the washboard, and then she'd boil them in the boiler. Then rinse them twice and hang them on the line. There's a lot of washing with 9 of us, and she wanted to be sure that those clothes was really white, so she really washed them. Mom could sew and mend in the evenings, and us girls could help mend socks also. Then when we ironed, we had to fire up the cook stove and heat the iron, a hot job. Mom and Pop both worked really hard raising us kids, but all families lived that way at that time. We were just an average family. But our parents were super. They were so ambitious and so good looking too. And they made a beautiful pair. Pop was still working in the creamery, and he was the one that when our cow would go dry, Pop would go up, we'd go up, and that's when we bought our milk from Mr. Moore, and I'd help him separate that, and the cream would come out one spout, and the milk would come out the other, and Pop would, them cream trucks Pop run, just picked up the cream. And the farmers, of course, then would take their skim milk and feed their hogs with that, and Pop hauled that cream all in 10-gallon cans. But our music was still very interesting for my dad. He wanted us to keep going with it. You see, we always did play stringed instruments, like that top picture there. We all had our own instruments, but Pop would play the drum. And Leona's playing clarinet, and Royal's playing the fiddle, and Luella plays the tenor banjo, and I played the mandolin. Mom's got a Hawaiian guitar, and Leo played the jug. That was after he grew up a little bit from right now, because he ain't that big yet. But then, after they started the band in Quasti, we had a band too, which brought us a lot of fun. And the music wasn't going fast enough to please my folks, so Pop hired Mr. Albert Cole to tutor us for our orchestra and band both. He came up once a week from Walker, and we would play, and he would teach us what we need to know. Then the band at Quasti needed a bass from the player for a player, so Pop and Mr. Cole decided Royal could play that, and the school furnished it. But that left the baritone without any player. Pop told Mom to learn that. Then Mom sent away and got Pop a trumpet to learn. Pop gave up on that and gave it to me. I took lessons at school from Mr. Moore on that, but I still played drums in the school band. Pop played them in our family band. By teaching us at home, Mr. Cole knew our little band was the head of the school band. He was busy starting bands at the schools, and when he'd put on the first concert, he'd come and pick up us 5 kids, and we'd help him put on a good concert. I remember we played in Raleigh and Garrison and Winthrop and a lot of others. See, with our instruments, the ones we played, as a regular band by itself, and when we set in with a beginner's band, we knew all their songs real good because we'd been through them a long time ago, so he knew if he took us with him that his band would be a success. And that worked really good till one time after we got older, we had even moved by then, he came up to pick us kids up to go out and play in his band, and Mom smelt beer on his breath. Well, I guess I don't need to tell you, but we didn't go with him that night and never went with him again. Because this time Pop was going full swing in the Raleigh Creamery. He had 2 cream trucks of his own. Our Uncle Calvin Butterfield drove one of them, and they picked up cream all over the east of Quasqueton, south and down to Walker Road, almost to Uncle Ray Zimfer's farm, and then all around Raleigh, clear over toward Brandon. Uncle Calvin used to stop at our house and the 4 corners there and rearrange his load. There were only 10-gallon cans, so he'd put the full ones in the front and the empty ones in the back, so it'd be easier for him to load the rest as he finished his route. Pop had to test the cream in every can. He had little test jars that he filled and marked from the numbers on the cans. This way he kept track of the butter fat and could pay his patrons accordingly. Here's a copy of one of his certificates that he had to get to test the milk. He had to take a little test, and the certificate itself cost him $2.50, but it also told on there how he had passed the inspection test to be running in one side, and the warm water could run out a little lower hole on the other side, and that water went out to the cows water tank. Sweet cream was worth more than sour. One day Pop had to throw a whole 10-gallon can of cream out because he found a mouse in it. He took first place in the state for the best butter that was something to be proud of. He had to go to Chicago, I remember, for that, and he come home all really excited because he took first place. And by this time, Pop and Grandpa Cady had made up. We had got to be with him and Annie some. And now that Pop and Grandpa had made up, we could see some of these pictures that had been taken of Grandpa before that with some of the kids, before Pop and him had that fallen out over his second marriage. So there he is, holding Luella, and that's Leona down there beside him. And that's a good picture of Grandpa. But he was married to Annie, and us girls we went down to Walker Homecoming one time, and it was always fun to get on the merry-go-round, and Grandpa would always stand by me and hold on to me so I wouldn't fall off the little horse. And they took us on the merry-go-round, him and Annie, 2 or 3 times, and Pop let us stay in Walker and go down to their place for supper while the rest of them went home. And Annie made us an awful nice supper, and we just had a lot of fun down to Grandpa's house, and that was the only time that we ever went to Grandpa's house when he was married to Annie. And then she died March 29th, that same year. Well, no, it would have been the next year, in 1930, I guess. And she was buried in Walker, close to Grandma Cady. But Grandpa left room between his 2 wives for him. We had a good, friendly family that lived a half-mile east of us, Carl and Ida Peterson. Mom would always cut their 2 sons' hair, and Mom and Pop would both do a good job of that. Mom would cut us girls' hair and Pop's, and then Pop would cut the boys' hair and Mom's. Well, we visited the Petersons quite often. And in the fall now, the leaves have all turned to color, and it is pretty all around us. The trees around our house is big and nice, but they let us know that winter is near. One day Pop took us kids over to Peterson's, but instead of staying, he let us stay to have supper. That was different because he'd never done that before. And that was fun, of course. It got pretty late, and Pop came back. This was the 3rd of November, 1930. On the way home, Pop says to us, "We have a new little prize fighter at home." When we got there, Mom was in the downstairs bedroom. Grandma Starr was there, and in there with Mom was a little baby boy. 4 boys in a row. He was a cute, nice, plump, sweet little guy. They named him Clifford Clark, Clifford after one of the Mason boys, and Clark after Grandpa, so his initials were the same as Grandpa Cady's, C.C. Cady. I remember what a cute baby he was, but this is the only picture I can find of him that is alone, and he's almost 7 years old there. So I remember how cute I thought his little legs were when Mama put short pants on him. Mom and Pop has 8 children now, and Grandma Starr and Dr. Clausen was here for every birth. In them days, the doctor would come to the house and just stay until the baby arrived. His bill was $25. Things sure have changed since then. We all loved to play with our new brother, and Christmas is almost here, and we were all anxious about what there would be for our new baby. You see, our balloons on the tree was a tradition, all right. Now this is a tree that I had. I just wanted to show you what the folks' tree looked. Some like this, only this one is shaped good, where our Christmas trees were just a branch of Mr. Moore's big cedar trees. And Royal would put little branches in and the thin spot. Then he would set it in the corner. We'd pop corn and string it and put it around along with some red and green rope. There were wax candles put on with metal pinch holders. You see, this has got electric lights on it, where we didn't have electric lights. We just had candles that we lit and just burned a little while on Christmas Eve. But they were cute. And it was after we got done decorating it, it was a pretty tree. Us kids hung up our socks and hurried to bed. Boy, it was hard to get to sleep. What we did about 11:30 or 12. The next morning we woke up with a lot of singing and noise. Pop had beat us up. We all jumped out of bed, ran downstairs in our pajamas. There was Pop in his long johns, running around in the kitchen and dining room, pulling the blue and white wagon. We looked at, and there was a big red wagon with yellowish wood stalk rack for William, a blue one for with a little backrest on, strap Cliff in, so that was for Cliff, and there was 2 tricycles, a big one for Leo and a smaller one for Stan. I can't remember what color they were. We girls each had a set of dishes made in China. I had 6 cups and saucers, plates, and cream pitchers, and a sugar bowl. And it was blue. The other 2 girls had just alike, 4 of each thing. They were a little bigger and kind of gold with a mark of blue around the edge. We each had a doll too. Mine could say Mama when I tipped it forward. They had china heads and cloth bodies. Royal was 14 now, and I really liked to go hunting, so he got a shotgun. He got a lot of rabbits and even brought home a few jackrabbits. Now, Pop seen all of our dishes, of course, and he told me that my dishes wouldn't last a week. Well, they did, even after all our tea parties that he came to. He was always pouring all the sugar in his cup, always clowning around. I still have service for 4 today, sitting in my china closet. They're 68 years old, and I gave some of them to my nephew, Larry Krob, and I've still got service for 4 instead of 6. So that's my set of dishes that I got in 1930. Of course, we all got new shoes again, along with a bucket of candy, 5 pounds of chocolate, mixed nuts and peanuts, apples and oranges, and our socks were full. I remember I got a mouth organ always, every year. And now that we're talking about special dishes, these 2 little dishes here that you're looking at, I went to Grandma's one time after I was grown up, and I asked her if she would let me have one of her things out of her glass cupboard to keep for a keepsake. She said, I tell you what, you just go over there and pick whatever you want. I said, no, I'd rather you just pick something and give it to me. I'd like that better. Well, okay then, she says, you should have these. I'll tell you the story about these. My father got them for me for a Christmas for 5 cents a piece. And I kept them all my life. And after I got married, I had them up on this shelf. Well, of course, Ella May liked them too. She just looked at them and just thought they were super. So she waited till I wasn't looking, and she crawled up there and got them down to look at them better. And she dropped them and broke the little brown one. And so then Grandma took it and fixed it, glued it back together. So she says, this has a history for you, and you should have this, because they were my presents. Your mother knocked them down and broke them, and then I fixed them. So I'd like to have you have them. And I said, well, thanks. I sure do like them, Grandma. Now these 3 pieces has got a history behind them too. This one on the right from the Manas. My Grandma Katie went down there on a trip in the horse and buggy days, and it took her all day to go down there. And she brought this dish back, and my mother gave it to me when I asked her for something to keep from her cupboard, like I did Grandma. She gave me that little plate and that little blue plate that she had when she was a girl, and that little red toothpick holder. Her youngest sister married William Scott, and he always wanted souvenirs. He's always picking up antiques. And Mom had to watch him every time he came, because he was after that little red, ruby red toothpick holder, because it was really worth a lot of money at that time, and I'm sure it would be yet. But anyway, I'm so proud that they gave me these things with a good history, that we can put them in our story, and so other people can see them too. Now this is a picture of the Kowalski band again, on the stage up in our high school room. The stage is off of that. But Mr. Cole was teaching us so much about music, and he wanted us to join the Walker band, the concert band. So we had band practice on Thursday nights in the firehouse under the water tower. Then they'd pull the bandstand out in the street, city square, and the concert was Saturday night. Every Saturday, all summer, we'd be there. On the 4th of July and Memorial Day, we'd march out to the cemeteries. One year we went to Walker, Quasqueton, Monty, and maybe to the church in Keeney. Can't remember for sure about that. I had a lot of fun when we marched, because I was the snare drummer for all of it. Mr. Cole would come back, march along beside me, and he'd say, I left. I had a good job, but I left. I had a good wife and 14 kids, but I left. Pop was never outdone when it came to putting flags on the car to decorate it for these occasions. They always had Walker Homecoming 2 days every summer. We each earned $1 a day. It was a lot of fun, and we got to spend the money for rides and hamburgers and stuff. We would ride the merry-go-round for 10 cents. And the only time I can remember of going with Annie and Grandpa was from the Walker Homecoming that time, when we went there for supper. But every once in a while, William would go away from Royal, get away from him. Royal always knew right where to find him. Yes, he could be at the hamburger joint. He'd done this so often that Royal called him Wimpy, after the cartoon character. William liked the hot dogs the best. The band all wore white clothes. The boys had white pants and shirts, and then Noel and I had white dresses alike. Mom made all of these clothes with a pedal sewing machine. We had to have 2 outfits apiece. Mom always kept them so white and clean. She was a wonderful mother. Our family music was so well known, we were called on for Farnborough meetings, and they had them once a month at different farmhouses. I remember one summer when we played at Ross Cherry's farm, Pop took the sideboards off of his cream truck and we used it for a bandstand. We did that a lot in the summer. We'd play a while before supper, then they had a business meeting, then we'd play some more. In the winter we played in the houses. We were the only family band in the neighborhood. So, of course, whenever we went to these Farnborough meetings, it was really exciting for us kids because we got to see a lot of other kids, meet a lot of other people, and have a good supper, picnic supper once in a while. It was fun. And we always played for the Raleigh Creamery picnic. It was in the park in Raleigh. Us kids were real young when we did all of this. And this picture that you're looking at, they wanted a picture to put in the paper when they was advertising the Creamery picnic. So we actually went to a studio and had a family picture taken. That's why we're not all on this one. But they had it in the Independence paper about us being the ones to perform at the Creamery picnic. We just played bluegrass music. Then I was still playing drums. Royal is fiddle, Leona the Hawaiian guitar, Luella tenor banjo, Pop his guitar, and William with the harmonica. We didn't have a band yet. I think we played in Raleigh about in 1929, the first time. Well, here I sit yet, 2 years later. Got Rose here, and she's trying to help me put this on a film so it can be looked at on the TV. And if you want to see how old a person gets in 2 years, just look at that. I'm a lot older now. This is 1998. So I was just remembering about the radio we had at home when we were kids. It run with batteries. It had one A battery and a couple B batteries, and one was just like the car battery. And we were so busy with music and work that the only time it was turned on, Pop would be listening to the news or a prize fight. The aerial wire run up on the top of the house. One day Royal was up there working on it, and I was playing on the monkey bar out in the park. I got the idea to show him what I thought I could do. I had practiced sitting on the bar, tipping over frontwards, and catching myself with my legs. I said, "Look, Royal," and over I went. Missed the catch, lit right on the top of my head. Yes, I saw stars. I didn't want him to see me cry, so I run for the back house. He kept saying, "Are you okay?" I just got inside and was crying when he knocked on the door, and he said, "You come out here so I can see if you're all right." I went out and he made sure I was okay. He was such a good big brother, always looking after all of us. Mom really counted on her help. Now, we never did get a picture of Grandpa Starr, Grandma's second man. So I put this in here so you can see her at about that time. She was this old and she's standing with Mom. That's in her yard there. But they also had a farm. Grandpa Starr had a farm along the Watson River southeast of Troy Mills. It was really a treat to go visit there. It was a rough-looking 3-room cabin, but they lived in it and there every summer. The winters they lived in Grandma's big house. I'll never forget how her homemade bread was. I guess she baked it in an oval-shaped roaster pan. She'd have a big dinner, and when she passed the bread, she'd cut it as she served it. She'd hold the loaf in the left arm, and with her right arm she'd start at the bottom, and with her big butcher knife would cut toward herself. As the slice was freed, she used her thumb against the knife blade and hand each of us a slice. She had homemade butter to go with it, and jelly. I think her pies were the best I've ever ate. Her cookie jar was always full of cookies. Yum, yum. After dinner, us kids would roam the timbers. His cows was pastured there. Wildflowers were everywhere. The hillside was covered with beautiful colors. It was an interesting adventure for us kids. The timber was so pretty every summer. Then when the 4th of July came, Pop would bring home butter tub full of fireworks, and he would buy 5-gallon of Hutchison's ice cream for near penance. They packed it with a dry ice with a canvas case around the metal container. We went down to Grandma's farm for that day. A lot of the relatives was there also. My cousins thought Uncle Charlie was just it. In fact, one of the boys was named after him. My dad's Uncle Charles Williams, his mother's brother, named his youngest son after Pop. Well, we'd have a big dinner, and all of us kids could shoot firecrackers, just 1-inch ones, and Pop would open up the ice cream, and everyone would eat all they wanted. One time our cousins ate so much, 2 of them were sick out behind the house. When we got home, Pop had the evening all planned. Royal and him would shoot some 3-inch firecrackers, put tin cans over them, and when they banged, the can would go as high as the house. Then they had skyrockets, and one of the things we had would go high in the air and then bang, and a little metal man with a parachute would float down to the ground. We sure always woke up on the 4th of July by Pop throwing torpedoes against the foundation of the house. He never could wait to get the excitement started. Now this is a family that always was down to Grandma's when we'd go down there for a holiday. And this is a family that ate too much ice cream. Down in the right-hand corner is Mom's sister, Annabelle. And up above her is their oldest daughter, Lucille. And the boy in the middle is Ernie. And the one to his left is Vivian. And that is Uncle Ray Zimfer down in the left-hand corner. And the one in the middle is Forrest, their youngest. And they always thought it was fun to be around Uncle Charlie. And we always thought it was fun to go down to their house too, because they always had beefsteak and big things like that we never had at our house. So then on the 4th of July, when the day was winding down and it started to get dark, Pop would bring out a balloon. He'd light a fire of paper under the end of it, and it would fill up with the smoke and gas fumes and go up in the air, higher than our big trees, and go floating with the wind. They were pretty colors and pretty big. Well, Pop would say, "Get in the car and we'll follow it." So we all hurried, and they would go 5 miles or so before landing. then they'd burn up. We had to be careful where they landed. Pop would have about 3 of them each year. How nice it was to have a dad full of fun and ideas. Mom went right along with it all. We had fun folks. Grandma Annie died March 1930, and Grandpa came to see us a lot then. He took care of the Walker Cemetery, and the row of the fir trees you see there is some he planted. Of course, after he lost Grandma Annie, that left Grandpa pretty much alone, and he liked to come to our place a lot. And him and I would go out into the porch, and he would turn on the phonograph to a waltz when Mom wasn't looking. And him and I danced a lot. He taught me to waltz, and he also taught me to play the mandolin, and gave me one of his. He really could play the violin very smooth. Now it's 1931. I don't remember too much about this year. I was in the 6th grade, and Luella and I got in trouble at school. We sewed a girl's coat all up so she couldn't get on in time to get the back seat of the bus. We had to stay in at recess for a week. Luella was in 7th grade. Oh yes, one day William, Leo, and I were playing by a culvert under the road between Moore's place and us. Well, Leo and William got down on their stomachs and by pulling with their arms, slid through to the other side of the road. William and I were almost the same size. So they said, "Come on, Mildred, you can make it. You ain't any bigger than William." So I got down on my knees and down onto my belly. I started scooting along. At first it seemed okay, but out in the middle it was dark. I got scared and got stuck. I couldn't go either way. William said, "Don't worry, just relax. When you get scared, you swell up. I know you can do it, so come on now." So I finally got on through, but I'll never forget how awful I felt to be stuck under the middle of the road and knowing cars was running over the top of me. Now, this is 1932, and Royal is just out of 9th grade. His last year of school, because Pop needed his help at the creamery. He got out of school in June. Mom made him white clothes so he could help Pop. He soon was driving cream truck for Pop and Mom, and some of us kids took turns going with him. We traveled a long ways and made a lot of stops. He ran the route around Pulaski and down toward Walker. Calvin ran the other end, around Raleigh. It was fun to ride in the big truck. It wasn't long till Pop bought Royal a little sport coupe. It was a red Whippet with a rumble seat. He was really proud of that car. But of course the girls wanted to learn to drive. So one evening he took Leona for a driving lesson. William and I was in the rumble seat. We went north up past Mr. Moore's, and the road had a lot of square corners, so Leona started out nice and slow. Royal sat out on the fender on the passenger side and worked the gas pedal with his hand. He made it go fast and then faster. Leona was yelling for him to quit, and she was scared to death. Royal was having a lot of fun at her expense. William and I was enjoying it all too. She made all the corners okay though. She done good. So Royal had his car, and he really enjoyed that. He drove it a lot when he was young like that. And things went on. One day, Pop come home from work all excited, and he said, "Ella May, I found it. I really found it." He had a box with 12 of the prettiest books I ever saw. And this is what some of them were. That's on the picture now. And it was, and Mom said, "What did you find?" And he said, "I found a religion that makes sense. I think I can understand the Bible now with the help of these books." A man had stopped and talked at the creamery, and Pop was really wound up. He read every minute he had time. The guy stopped back about every 3 weeks, and Papa and him would visit and read some from the Bible and these books. Now, Pop was really excited about all this, but Mom didn't act as excited as he was. Pop was so happy with what he was learning that he was telling everyone he talked to all about the good news of God's kingdom. One night he come home with a brand new Atwater Kent radio. It was a console, run by batteries like the other one, but the speaker was built in instead of up on the top like the old one. He'd heard that Joseph Rutherford was giving an hour talk, and he wanted to be sure to hear it. This is a picture of Brother Rutherford that Pop wanted to hear on the radio. So when it was time for him the next day, we all had to sit down and listen to it for a whole hour. Boy, we wasn't to make a sound. Pop talked so much to the directors of the creamery that they fired him. He made them have a meeting and vote on the issue by raising their hands. There was only one voted for him, good old Albert Sloan. They said the reason they was firing him is because they were tired of buying high-priced instruments. When Pop come home from that meeting, I could hear him crying that night. Us kids were in bed. I'd never heard Pop cry before, and so of course I cried too. It made me so sad. Then they hired a new butter maker, and he blew up the boiler the first day. So of course after the new butter maker blew up the boiler, the directors wanted Albert Sloan to come out and talk to Pop. Of course, Pop and Mom talked it over too, and Mom didn't really think he ought to go back and help him after what they'd done to him, but she decided that whatever Pop wanted to do would be okay with her. So they came to Albert Sloan and asked him to come out and ask Pop what to do about it. And Albert told him, "You go ask him yourself. I didn't fire him." But he finally got talked into coming along, and Pop went back to help them. Pop by that time was almost hired by the Jessup Creamery already, so he helped Calvin and recommended that Calvin would be a good butter maker, my Uncle Calvin, Mom's brother. So Pop done the cream testing for him until he could get his license. And Pop talked religion to Grandma every time we went down there, and they just never could agree on it at all. Us kids didn't know how important it was, so we kind of resented it. Well, you see, every time we was there for Sunday dinner, Pop and Grandma would get to talking about the Bible. And the main thing that was the difference in there, what they believed, is Grandma thought that when you died, you either went to heaven or you went to hell. And if you wasn't a good person, you would go to hell, and that was a place of torment. And Pop kept trying to show her in Revelations where it says that hell gave up the dead that was in it, calls it just the grave. So he was trying to explain to her that people would be resurrected, and that hell was really another name for grave, because they wasn't judged when they died. They'd be resurrected and then judged. But they never could agree on that, so we just put up with it. And they seemed to enjoy talking about it. So that's the way it was. Our visits were always full of discussions about the Bible. So now we're in 1933 in this story, and this is my little sister Charlotte. She was born July the 26th, and she was a real sweet little girl. We hadn't had any girls for a while. They'd all been boys, 4 boys in a row, and Grandma was tied down then, so she couldn't come and be with Mom when Charlotte was born. So my Aunt Doris, Mom's sister, came to be there, because Grandma Starr had to stay home with Grandpa. He had a cancer on his nose and needed a lot of care. Well, I got to stay all night at Doris's place. She was married to T.F. Osborne. They was farming down by Walker, and Doris thought it'd be good if I would come down and stay with their oldest daughter, Amber. T.F. was a small man and a lot of fun. He got Amber and me up, and she helped him milk the cows. He even taught me to milk one. Sure was an experience for me. And this is Amber, the one that I spent the night with, and just spending time with her was an experience, all right. Her and I used to play together, and we would mark out a house and play house in it and pretend we was cooking and everything else. But we were supposed to do Doris's housework while she was up there with Mom. Mom was having my baby sister. Anyway, when I got home, I found out that Pop and Mom had named the baby Charlotte Elaine. We hadn't had a baby girl around for a long time, so she was really cute and sweet. Now that all this stuff had got straightened around, and he got Calvin going at the creamery, and the baby had been born, and all of this, Pop was now started working at Jessup, and the folks had bought a 41-acre farm. Now he worked at Jessup until his health failed him when he was about 40, I think. I don't know just which year this was. But anyway, when he left Jessup, they gave him this here letter of recommendation in case he wanted another job. But at that time, Pop was having dizzy spells and falling, and we were afraid he'd fall into a churn, so he quit the creameries and came home. But in the meantime, we were moving up onto this farm behind the Dane Church on the Quasqueton and Independence Road. Pop and Mom had saved money enough to pay cash. I remember watching Pop line all his bills up on the piano stool, $100 in every pile. A lot of money, because we were in depression. Now this is as near a country picture as I have on hand here, and Pop looks like a farmer here. These 2 horses he had when he was young, but when we went up there on the farm, of course, he had animals on the mind that he would have to buy some, and they only paid $40 an acre for the farm, and it was a 41-acre farm, so it cost $1,640. Then Pop went to an auction sales and bought a complete line of farm machinery, 7 cows, counting the bull, Jerseys and Guernseys was what they were, and some pigs and chickens, and a team of horses that he called King and Flory. They were bigger than these horses he's got here, but they was kind of like that. They were kind of reddish brown horses. And wait till I tell you about the house. This farm had a 4-room house with a small cellar. It had 1 bedroom, and there were 11 of us to move in. Well, they set up a bed in the bedroom for Pop and Mom. Then in the daytime, we'd put 2 more mattresses on top and a bedspread over them. At night, we'd carry 1 out to the living room for us 3 girls to sleep on the floor. Then 1 in the dining room. The 4 boys slept crossways on that one on the floor, and Royal slept there by them on a high-headed sofa. So we had a lot of work making and unmaking beds, but it was fine. One day while we were moving, Leona and Mom had took a load of stuff up to the farm. Leona wanted to drive. Well, I didn't think I had any pictures that would show any of the farm at all, but that is our little barn on the farm, and Luella and Leona standing in the front yard. This is about the size Leona was when she was wanting Mom to let her drive the car, and she hadn't had a lot of lessons, just that one with Royal and a little bit. So pretty soon we saw them coming down the little hill east of the drive, and there was a big tree on each side of our driveway. Then west of the trees was a sign held in place with 2 iron posts. We thought they were coming pretty fast, and then we see Leona driving. Mom was yelling at her, and pretty soon she tried to hit the driveway, but smashed right over the sign and right up into the front yard. Charlotte was in her little basket in the back seat, and the basket didn't move. She was still asleep, but you see, Leona don't even drive now. I've never asked her why. We don't have too many pictures of this little house that we lived in, but this is Leona and Royal's wife, Marie Warner, after Royal was married and Leona was still home. And they're sitting on the cellar door by Pop and Mom's bedroom windows. And behind them windows is where that bed was all piled up. And so I remember we started to Quoski School in September, but we were in the middle of moving at that time. But about the first Friday we rode on the bus to school and then walked 2.5 miles to the farm where we had moved. All of us but Luella started to the country school the next week. I was in 8th grade now, and this little school had the 1st to the 8th graders in it. The teacher, Ethel Rose, was her name, and there was 4 of us 8th graders, 1 boy, Malvin Hanson, and his sister, Lavona. The teacher's sister, Dorothy, was in 8th grade too. So Malvin was pretty special. He walked me home and made Dorothy all mad a lot of times. The picture of Ethel Rose, our teacher, and that's our little schoolhouse in the background where we went to school. And we carried our water in a pail down about a half a mile south of the schoolhouse, and it was where Benders lived. Royal went with Ona Bender for quite a while, and so we got to know her real well. But the little school was a lot of fun. We'd have picnics and winter roasts and play ball and all kinds of things. But when test time come, us 8th graders had to go to town school. We went to Winthrop once and Quasqueton the next time. And I remember she'd keep us after school, and she'd have her boyfriend come, and he'd bring the wieners and stuff, and we'd have more fun than we did study. But anyway, we went to town to get our testing done, and I just passed, and that was all. So I was in high school before 1934 was over. So after all the studying and all the running towns for the tests and everything, I finally got my 8th grade diploma in June of 1934. So I wasn't 13 yet. I was still 12 years old when I got into high school. Now Luella was in 9th grade when we moved up on the farm, and this is a picture of Pop Mom sitting out in the backyard, and that's our driveway after we made the new driveway out on the north side of the house. There's also a driveway on the south side of the house, and that platform you can see on the right side of them there is the pump platform where the pump was. And that machinery that you can see sitting out there behind Pop, I think that's a horse-drawn cultivator. And so that was just one of the times we caught them relaxing. And Leona and Luella both quit school after 9th grade. Mom said if Pop needed Royal, she needed Leona. Pop said if Leona didn't finish high school, Luella didn't need to either. Luella was so smart, she could have been valedictorian if she could have went. I didn't care when I quit, but my 9th year was a pretty exciting one. Clyde Bender used to let me ride to school in his car. I had 3 girls try to beat me up for that. Then there was Benny Adams that would wait at the place to see if I was walking. He liked to walk with me. One Valentine's Day, I was almost to our driveway when here came Russell Hutchison out of the trees. He gave me a pretty valentine. He couldn't talk fine because of a horse kicking him in the head when he was little, but his family was very poor, so I was nice to them. Well, I got home and was trying to bake a cake. Leona and Luella teased me for hours. Finally, I took the cake out of the oven and thought it was done, and I baked it in a pan with a hole in the middle. I went to put it out on a plate, and when it came out of the pan, it all started running down in the hole. The girls blamed my valentine and my excitement over it, so I just threw the thing in the stove. It was a pretty valentine. I really appreciated the valentine, even though it don't sound like it. The kids teasing me about it is what, and the cake and all of that is why I finally burned it. But I always had a kind of a soft spot for Russell because he always liked me so well. And he lived right down over the hill from us, so it made it handy. Well, our house was just getting too little now, so Grandpa had a barn on his place in Walker. He said we could use the lumber out of that. So he tore it down and pulled the nails, and we built on a big living room, a 10 by 26 foot glassed-in porch. It was a 2-story addition. It had cement floors, and we mixed it all with hose in a mortar box. The boys slept upstairs. It never was finished yet, so they climbed a ladder in the corner of the porch to get up there. I helped Grandpa quite a bit with the shingles. I held held 2x4s for him too. The boys and I helped with the sheeting, and then the winter was cold, so we had to cook the cook stove in the kitchen and a wood heater in the porch. No heat anywhere else. Us girls slept in the living room. We had an old barber fixture that Pop and Grandpa had used when they run the barber shop in Walker, and Pop put that in the double door opening between the dining room and the front room. We would crawl through the hole in the middle of it, getting into our room. Well, one day, Pop's Uncle George come up from Cedar Rapids. And this is Uncle George and Aunt Sade. And he came up alone with Bill Norris. And he is a 6-foot tall man, and he weighed 98 pounds. And if you notice, his mustache is long, and he used to have it curled up at the sides. But anyway, he was a good old guy. He used to come up and stay with us a while. But this time, he brought this guy, Bill Norris, along. And Uncle George wanted us to go into show business. This Bill was a professional clown, and his girlfriend was a dancer. This is Bill in his clown outfit, sitting on the box where he would crawl down in there and get the door shut and everything in just a little bitty box. And this is his letterhead that he had to get their jobs from the booking agent in Cedar Rapids. And this is Bill Norris and in his professional clown suit. Of course, his girlfriend was a dancer. And he said he'd train us kids through the winter, and we'd be ready to go on the road in the spring. They'd train us for $500. It was during the Depression, so that was a fortune to us. Pop said he couldn't afford it, so Uncle George put up the money. That was the winter that Grandpa and us went to Swisher, and Uncle Henry was there, and we entertained in Swisher while we were on training. We started training once a week. Royal and William were acrobats. Leon and Luella learned the Spanish dance and tap dancing, and we learned how out of a book for the tap dancing. I learned the Russian dance. This is his girlfriend, Clara Auburn. She was the one that danced and went with him on his show business when he went out in the show. And he had a wife named Annie, but you didn't see her very often. He was always with Clara instead. Mom was a friend of Clara's until she died, so Mom kept up with her. Of course, Bill died quite a while before Clara did. And this is the outfit Mom made me to do the Russian dance in. Those boots are made out of oilcloth for the tops of them, with elastic in under by the heel. But Mom made that all. I remember the skirt is absolutely round. She laid it down on her round table and cut it out around the edge. And when I would swing around, it would stick straight out around my waist, and I had undies to match, of course. And here's a picture of Pop, and he was the Irish comedian, and he also played the drums. And he's got on that long-tailed coat that was a dark green, and his pants were striped with some yellow in the stripes, and his hat was a big black top hat with red whiskers. So he made quite a comedian. Of course, he could sing Irish songs. About his old high hat was one of them. So he had his part to do in the show. Was a singer. She sang with the orchestra. She sang, "There's an old spinning wheel in the parlor." And she did a good job of that. She had a pretty voice. And she had this white satin dress. And I think she made this too for herself. And this is Royal and William doing their acrobatic act. And Royal could just swing him down and put him right up with one arm. He also held him in a chair in his teeth up over his head. And Bill and I both weighed 100 pounds at that time. And Royal had to keep practicing to keep the strength in his arms so he could do that. So if Bill wasn't around, there was a few times that Royal had me pretend I was Bill, and he'd lift me up in the air like that. Anyway, that's quite a trick. And this is Leona and Luella. They're doing the tap dance that we learned out of a book. Call it the Buck and Wing. It's really a clog dance. I didn't dance with them this year. They've just done the dancing. But the next year we all three tap danced a little bit. Now this is Leona and Luella in their Spanish costumes. The castanets in their hand. You see that they clicked as they danced, and their dresses were fiery red with the white flowers, and the flowers in their hair matched the dresses. So that was a beautiful dance that they put on. Now we had to go down to Cedar Rapids to a studio to get our pictures taken for this show. All these pictures that you've been seeing was taken in a studio. And Bill took us down there, and we had to put on extra makeup. You see how heavy we are made up, and us girls had to wear white socks and rub white stuff on our arms and things, and we all had on lipstick and eyebrow pencil and all that. And while we were getting the show pictures, Mom and Pop decided to get a family picture taken at the same time with all of our instruments. So this is what this is. The little boy there by the horn is Cliff, and then it's Leo and Stan and Charlotte. Of course, Rosetta wasn't here yet, so we know most of them in that picture. And anyway, that's how come we got a family picture taken at that time. Mom worked hard because she made most all them costumes. Mom didn't really play violin, but they had her pick up one for the picture. And I guess I told about how everyone was dressed before. And the next thing we need to look at is a picture of what we traveled in. Pop made a semi-house car, we called it, and we all traveled in that. And I do have a picture of that. It's not really good, but it'll show kind of what it's like. We were all real busy through the winter. We practiced almost every day to get our show in shape. But Pop and Royal decided that we didn't have anything to travel in. So this fifth wheel is what Pop made, and it's on a 1930 International truck. And he shortened up the frame of it and had him put a thing on to fasten a semi on, a semi hitch. And then Pop had a metal frame built to match. Then he built a house car out of 2x4s and plywood onto that. He rolled the two front corners off, rounded them off, and put two car windows that could open in both corners. there was a screen with a little door to open up so we could hand Pop stuff if he stood on the running board. I think it was the first fifth wheel ever made in Iowa. We all rode and ate and slept in it. There was 3 partitions in there at night. There was a curtain that was pulled across. Pop and Mom slept in the middle on a davenport that made into a bed. It was a leather davenport. Us girls had a sanitary cot up in the kitchen area in the front, and the boys, there was 2 double beds made on the right-hand side of that back door there, and the boys and Charlotte slept on them double beds back there. Now, Bill Norris was our booking agent. He got our appointments at the studio in Cedar Rapids, and he'd send them out from there. Our first job was a vaudeville show, was in Minnesota. We had a contract with a carnival, and we went to about 5 small towns with that. We had a great time. We could ride all the rides free and play all the games in the tents because we were part of it, and we all knew one another. I remember we even got Pop to ride on the swings and Ferris wheel. You see, we'd ride these when they weren't getting much business. We'd yell and rock the seats on the Ferris wheel to draw the crowd, and as people paid to ride, they'd let us off one by one. There was an old popcorn man, and he always called me Tommy because I was always with my brothers. Every night he'd give us all his popcorn left over. He kind of liked me. This is what we was camping around that summer. Most all summer we were camping around the fair. And this is not a picture of the carnival that we traveled with, but it looks a lot like it. The Ferris wheel back there in the background, that's just kind of the way they had it set up in that first place we went. But the guy that owned the carnival, he didn't pay us. So we had played in Watertown and about 6 other small towns in Minnesota. We put on 2 shows a day and was 3 or 4 days in each town. We were most always set up in the city park. So we quit the guy, and Pop got a judgment against him, and for years he tried to get something out of him and couldn't, so he never did pay us. So then Bill Norris started getting us jobs and contract them. And he was here in Cedar Rapids, and we had contracts with the county fairs, and we were guaranteed our wages even if we got rained out. All of our shows was in front of the grandstand, and we always parked close to the stage because the Onondaga had to change their costumes from tap dancing dresses to the Spanish dress. Of course, there were 3 little kids to be watched while we were entertaining. Stanley was the oldest one. Cliff was 5 and Charlotte was 3. Another reason for keeping our house car close. It was a busy summer for Mom and us girls. We done all the washing clothes over on the washboard. And in our camper, I didn't mention it before, but us girls slept on a sanitary cot, and it had leaves that let down on both sides. So we used it to sit around the table when we ate too. But it was so narrow that we had to, when we got ready to, one of us wanted to roll over in the night, we'd wake the others up and say, "Come on, let's roll over." So we'd all roll over at the same time. And I slept in the middle. What fun. So some of the places we played was in well, we played in Swisher, but we just played in a theater there. It was in the winter time, and we played in Palo. That was outside. We went to Cloutier on New Year's Eve in 1936. That was after we got in off the road. But anyway, Mr. Cole went along. We had a little German band. I can't remember the names of a lot of the towns that we was in, but we played in 7 different states that year. And this was our little German band that we entertained with. A lot of times before we put our show on, we would play band music for an hour first, and then put on our show, just to entertain the crowd. And I know that when we played down in Missouri, it was 105 degrees in the shade, and we were in a kind of city park. And when we danced, we got so hot. My shoes were small, and I blistered both heels, just doing my Russian dance the first time. Papa and Mom got me some new shoes in a little shoe store they had there. They felt awkward to me. Pop said to me, I was sweating blood thinking how sore your heels was and all the energy in that heat. Of course, I had to stomp my feet in my dance, and when you got blisters on your heels, of course, it hurt. We stayed there for 2 days. This is the advertisement in Craig, Missouri, where I had all the trouble with my shoes and all that. It was in Craig. And this is their advertising that they give. They called it a homecoming celebration. It's just about like Walker has at their homecoming. And then if you open it up, it shows our picture here. It's so raggedy because it's been stored for years, but maybe I can get it. So there is our picture in this advertisement. I didn't get it in there very good. There is in that advertisement, and it's got in there every day's program, and every afternoon and every evening we would put on a concert first, and then our vaudeville show. So they really liked us there. And one day they had their city band play too in the afternoon. So that's the place we played in Missouri. So this is another advertisement from another place we played. Mom kept some of them, and some of them got destroyed probably. But this one's from Miller, Nebraska. And it was on August the 21st and the 22nd of 1936. And here again it gives a Friday program where we played music a half hour and then put on our show afterwards in the afternoon. And then at night, it was 7:30 when we put on our show at night after supper. 7 o'clock we played band music, and then at 7:30 we put on our show. And that was, well, it was hot everywhere we went that time. And this here had our review right here in the middle. It says the Cady Family Review of 8 comedians, acrobats, singers, and dancers, 8-piece band and orchestra, tap dancing and a fiery dance in Spain by the Cady sisters. So we got advertised all right. So this is all the advertisements for this place. Now this is a book from the biggest fair we played for. This is the one out in Idaho. And it was called the Twin Falls County Fair, but actually it was a state fair, at least that's what they told us it was, and they always had it in Filer, Idaho, because of the difference in the size of the towns. Filer was a small town, and Twin Falls were big, and they had rodeos and everything. I remember the trick riders and ropers, and we were camped right in the middle of all of that, and Monty Montana and his wife had pretty horses there, and they were there from Hollywood. And this is just pictures of different things. This is the fair board. We were invited to a banquet, and when we got in there and all sat down, we had to play a little while first. When we get all sat down at that big old long table, there was 3 or 4 forks and a bunch of spoons and a bunch of knives by each plate, and Pop had told us, you watch me, and whatever I do, you do. So we sat down, and the head guy of the fair board, he sat down at his place at the end of the table, and he reaches down and he grabs them forks and extra silverware, and he piles them over on the table, and he says, I don't know what they think we need all them for. And I could just hear Pop go, because he didn't know what to do with them all either. So we got through that all right. But this is where I found my silver dollar that I still have. It was on the fairgrounds, and it was in a pretty area, and I think this might have been the last place that we played that year. But I remember when we was traveling from one place to the other, one time we run into a whole bunch of sheep, and we had to just stop and let the sheep and the cowboys go past us. Of course, us kids, you know, cowboys, wow. On horses besides, with spurs in their boots, we just couldn't hardly get over that. So here, maybe we can get a picture of these sheep the way we see them from the camper. And sure enough, Rose got all them sheep right there where we can see them. She's a good camera gal, and if she puts me in the pictures, I'm just going to tell who did it. That's what I am. I remember that we was just driving along, and we met these sheep, and you could just see them just as far as you could look. There was sheep a-coming like these here, and coming up the street, and there was 4 cowboys with them, and we had to just stop and wait quite a while for them to get them all drove out around us. Now, I remember we played in Fullerton, Nebraska too, and they hadn't had rain for months. It was dry and it was hot. So we were parked in the shade most of the day, and after we finished our show at night, we was allowed to go ride on all the different rides. Royal found himself a girlfriend, and the train ran through the town, and kind of slow. So Royal and this girl jumped onto it, rode out of town to a steep hill, and when the train slowed down, they got off. Well, it was hours before another train came back by, and Royal was very late getting in. Pop stayed awake worrying about him, so of course they had a few words, and then more the next morning. Royal was very upset and wanted to leave and go home, but Pop said to him, "What home?" Royal was 20 years old that August, and he was our driver, so with Bill Norris's help, we got him to stay. The only trouble we had was getting along in our small space. We only tuned our instruments with Williams harmonica. That's the only thing we had to tune with. And I remember Royal had an awful time getting the guitar tuned. he'd say, blow, and William would over and over again. William ran short of wind, and I remember Royal yelling, blow, and hit William a little bit in the chest. So that was the town of trouble. But we all got through tuned and got our 2 days finished, and everything seemed good again, so we started for our next appointment. The Platte River, where we crossed, it was bone dry, and it seemed like we were just driving miles above a desert, and it was a long bridge. All the crops in Nebraska were burned, and Iowa wasn't any better. We had got acquainted with the Shockman family. They are Jehovah's Witnesses, and Leona liked their oldest son, Frank, and this is Frank, and his folks camped out in our pasture and things, so we knew him real well, and I ran around with his little sister, Normie, and so when we went to go out on the road, Pop hired Frank, Leona's boyfriend, to stay on our farm and farm it for a share of the profits. Along with the depression and the drought, it was hard on everyone. No one had hardly enough to eat. We took our show to Wyoming then, after we was in Nebraska, and the county fair was in Laramie, Wyoming. We drove through Cheyenne, and it was about noon, so we could see a park, and there was a corral on one end. We stopped and had dinner, and we watched a bunch of real cowboys breaking horses to ride. That was very interesting. A lot fell off, but they really put on a show for us. Wyoming was all dried up too. We drove for miles at times and never saw anything. Oh, there were some prairie dogs and the jackrabbits and cactus all over. And when we'd go through small towns, they were okay. But Pop planned our route, so we missed all the big cities.